The storm and collision had transformed the once orderly sailing ship into a dying wreck, illuminated only by lightning and swinging lanterns. Seawater poured through the shattered midship section in unstoppable torrents, while the deck sagged visibly beneath the strain of the breaking hull. Captain Hiscocks forced his family upward through the confusion. "Move!" he shouted over the storm. Elizabeth clung tightly to Clara's hand while Thomas stumbled beside them, pale with terror. Miss Whitmore struggled behind carrying blankets and fighting to remain upright as the deck pitched violently beneath her feet. Around them, sailors fought desperately to launch the stern lifeboat, while others screamed warnings from below deck as flooding spread rapidly through the cargo holds. "The pumps are gone! She's breaking up! Cut those fools loose!" The Charlwood lurched heavily to starboard. One of the remaining masts collapsed into the sea with a deafening crash, dragging rigging and sailcloth across the deck in a tangled avalanche. Captain Hiscocks reached the lifeboat with 2 crewmen already holding it steady against the rolling ship. "Get them aboard," he ordered. Elizabeth climbed in first, clutching Clara tightly beside her. Thomas followed while Miss Whitmore nearly slipped between the rails before a sailor caught her arm and hauled her safely down. The captain turned toward the crewmen. "Lower her away!" The ropes screamed through the davits as the lifeboat descended toward the boiling sea below. For one brief moment, Hiscocks allowed himself to believe they might survive. Then the Boston finally tore free. The wounded Charlwood shuddered from bow to stern with a deep, horrifying groan that seemed to come from the very bones of the ship herself. And suddenly the hull split apart. The deck beneath the captain's feet buckled violently as seawater exploded upward through shattered timbers. The broken midsection gave way entirely, allowing the sea to rush unchecked into the ship's interior. "Captain!" Mercer screamed somewhere through the darkness. Too late. The stern dropped sharply as the Charlwood began sinking almost immediately. Below him, the lifeboat struck the water hard. A towering wave crashed directly into it seconds later. Hiscocks watched in horror as the small wooden boat rolled sideways beneath the impact. Then it vanished. The next lightning flash revealed bodies thrown into the Black Sea. Elizabeth, the children, Miss Whitmore, and the sailors, all scattered among wreckage and foam as freezing water swallowed them. "Elizabeth!" Without hesitation, Captain Hiscocks leapt from the collapsing deck into the storm. The sea hit like ice. He surfaced choking among wreckage and screaming wind, desperately searching the darkness. "Clara!" Another wave rolled over him. Nearby, one of the surviving crewmen, able seaman Jacob Miller, struggled through the wreckage-filled water. Through a flash of lightning, he spotted Clara thrashing weakly beside a floating section of broken hatch cover. The girl was barely conscious. Miller lunged through the freezing sea, grabbing her coat just as another wave threatened to pull her under. "I've got you!" he shouted. He dragged her across the shattered timber and wrapped one arm through the wreckage to hold them both afloat. Nearby, Captain Hiscocks surfaced briefly again. For one instant, Clara saw her father through the rain and lightning, only yards away, fighting desperately through the waves toward them. Then darkness swallowed him again. He never resurfaced. Around them, the Charlwood was dying. The stern lifted sharply into the storm-torn sky, while shattered rigging dangled into the sea. Lantern light flickered briefly through broken cabin windows as water consumed the last remaining air trapped within the hull. Then, with a final groaning roar of twisting iron and collapsing timbers, the great bark slipped beneath the crashing waves. Gone within minutes. Only wreckage remained scattered across the storm-black channel. Not far away, the steamship Boston continued battling the storm. Though heavily damaged at the bow, her engines still functioned. Unlike the sailing vessels caught helpless beneath the gale, the steamer retained the ability to maneuver against wind and sea. Captain J.R. Barber immediately ordered lifeboats lowered and search lanterns lit, despite the danger of remaining near the wreckage in such conditions. Again and again, the Boston steamed slowly through the debris field, while crewmen hauled survivors from the freezing water, half-drowned sailors clinging to broken spars, shattered hatch covers, and floating cargo. Each rescue risked collision with unseen wreckage or broaching in the heavy seas. But Barber refused to abandon the scene. Farther away, the small schooner Albion attempted to continue her own search. Yet unlike the steam-powered Boston, Captain Briggs could not hold position against the storm indefinitely. The gale and enormous seas steadily drove the little sailing vessel farther eastward, despite every effort to remain near the sinking site. At last, Briggs had no choice. With bitter reluctance, the Albion gave up the search and disappeared into the darkness toward the distant shelter of Eddystone. By dawn, the storm had begun to weaken. The Boston remained alone among the wreckage and survivors scattered across the cold grey Channel waters. Captain Hiscocks, Elizabeth, Thomas, Miss Whitmore, most of the crew, all gone. Only 5 sailors survived the disaster. And Clara Hiscocks, half frozen and barely alive, beside Jacob Miller on the floating wreckage that had carried them through the longest night of their lives.